So I really just experienced fatigue in a way that I never had before. My brain didn't work at all. I couldn't read a book. I just didn't have the capacity. For many of those years, Miguel, I felt a good deal of guilt and shame, because I couldn't support myself part of that time. I couldn't be there for my friends and my family in the way that I wanted to be. It's just, a unique form of torture and very hard, especially when no one understands what's going on, and back then you'd say, well, I'm suffering from a lot of fatigue. I'm tired. And folks would say, yeah, me too. And it's like, ugh, how do you explain that? By the time I joined your program, I felt like, I could see the finish line. I just could not get there on my own. I just needed a little help. I joined, I listened to a lot of, the phone calls in the beginning. Those were really, really helpful. And then I had a couple of calls with my coach, and oh, she was wonderful. And she gave me some really specific tools, and that was it. Like I got it. I got it. It was exactly what I needed. It was very specific. It was precise. And yeah, that was it.
How's it going, guys? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Sara all the way from Tennessee. She was sick for well over 15 years. And at her worst, there were times when she was too tired to lift her arms, but she's worked her way out of this. She's gone from surviving to truly getting her life back and just ready to move on to the next chapter in her life. But Sara, you want to quickly introduce yourself to everybody here?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sara Sharp-Lamance from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Lovely to be here. I have been watching these videos for 2 years now, and they have helped me so much, and it feels kind of amazing to be making one finally.
Yeah. It almost comes full circle. A lot of people, this is their ultimate goal when they come across these kind of videos and they realize, wow, recovery is actually possible. One day I want to be there on the channel or online sharing my story of overcoming this thing. So let's take it back to the past a little bit. 15 years, that's a very long time. Some people have this for 6 months or 3 years, and even that feels like a lifetime. So 15 years ago, how did this all start? Do you remember how it came about? Was it one thing, or did it just slowly happen over time?
It slowly happened over time. I think maybe the final catalyst for me after years of a lot of stress was that I got pleurisy, of all the weird things. It was very 18th century of me, but I got pleurisy and never quite seemed to recover after that.
Yeah. Did the symptoms how did the symptoms show up as well? Like, what were the early signs? Did it all hit you at once?
Yeah, I was getting sick more often, and I wasn't a person who tended to get sick. But once I got pleurisy, I got pleurisy twice actually. And then just, kept ending up with some weird virus or another. And then I just got increasingly tired, and to the point that I could barely function. And well, I had a real personal shattering, as a lot of people do. It was just a tough time in my life. And I really crashed at that point, and then kind of didn't recover for a long time.
Yeah, a lot of people, once they look back and after they learn a lot of, the causes of this stuff, they realize that, oh, it wasn't just one thing. There were a few things happening in my life at the time when, you know, everything kind of fell apart. So were you able to go back and identify those different stressors or even personality traits leading up to it that might have caused some of this?
Yeah, I think so. I am a quintessential people pleaser, so I feel sure in retrospect that played into it. I also am naturally a really high energy person, and was just, much like you, was just driving myself into the ground as an activist and an artist, working very long hours. I was an anti-death penalty activist at the time, and so was, you know, um, working hard at that to save lives. I felt like, there were lives on the line. And so that feels like a lot of pressure. So I think it was a combination of things, it was just kind of this perfect storm. And my body finally just couldn't take it anymore and crashed in no uncertain terms.
And what were those symptoms that you felt when you had that first crash?
So I really just experienced fatigue in a way that I never had before. I didn't have a lot of the symptoms that other people had. I was just too tired to function. My brain didn't work at all. If I was working um, a job at all, I couldn't read a book. I just didn't have the capacity. My main symptom always was PEM, or post exertional malaise, which back in the day could be walking up a flight of stairs, or spending half a day out, out and about, or going to the grocery store.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I just crashed really, really hard after any kind of physical exertion at all.
Mm. And this is back 15 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When
And
there
this
was
is back when, as we were saying earlier, back before there was any information or any understanding of what was going on. So those of us who have suffered for years and years, I think thought for most of those years that we weren't going to get any better.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what we were told. That's what we believed. That was certainly my experience. And yeah, it was just hard. It was lonely. And for many of those years, Miguel, I felt a good deal of guilt and shame, because I couldn't support myself part of that time. I couldn't, be there for my friends and my family in the way that I wanted to be. It's just, a unique form of torture, and very hard, especially when no one understands what's going on, and back then you'd say, well, I'm suffering from a lot of fatigue. I'm tired. And folks would say, yeah, me too. And it's like, ugh, how do
Oh,
you
yeah.
explain that?
Oh, yeah.
You
Oh, and people
can't.
still say that to this day. It's like, "Oh, you have chronic fatigue?" I think I'm chronically fatigued as well. I'm really tired when I wake up in the morning and, you can't even explain to some people.
Right.
I just
Right.
never understand. And what you just said is so true. Trying to fit in social circles and trying to spend quality time with family and friends. I think that is a challenge that people on the outside don't realize that we're going through. They think it's, oh, you're just tired and, oh, maybe you're dealing with a handful of symptoms. But there's also the other aspect of it, of that identity loss, not being able to fit in, losing your friend circles because you have to
Can't
decline
keep
a lot of
up.
these invitations. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's not that you don't wanna go to these things, it's you want to, you really want to, but you
Right.
have to say no because you just flare up every time you
That's
go
right.
out.
And all of that is compounded by the fact that there are some days that are really good, or at least there were for me. So, I've always said that, in many ways I was one of the lucky ones with when it came to MECFS, because I was able to live a half life. I was only able to live a half life, but I was able to live a half life. So, depending on the day, some days no one would have known that there was anything wrong, So that makes that even trickier,
Mhm.
when it comes
Yeah.
to folks understanding what it is that's
Yeah, you're
happening.
in that gray area. You're not quite completely bedridden, but you're not quite fully functional, so you have to put on this face that you're all normal, you're all good, but internally, you're living within a box,
Right.
and there are so many things that you have to hold back on. Because I remember I was the same way for quite a while because I would crash, and then it would take me like 6 months to build myself up again. I'd go back to work, end up working full time,
Mhm.
be fully functional, and then end up crashing again. And I did that about 4 times. There were about 4 cycles, and every time I did build myself back up, there were things my friends wanted to do or certain events that I struggled to participate in, but I still did it anyways because I wanted to fit in, like
Mhm.
going to music festivals or going to see the fireworks in downtown. Like, I remember my heart would just be pounding, but I had to kind of brush it off and pretend like nothing was happening because I knew nobody would understand. So, with you going through this and not really having access to any answers or resources online, what was going through your mind when all of this hit you 15 years
Mhm.
ago?
Well, at first, I think I thought it was temporary, and I think I thought that for an illogical number of years.
Mhm.
But hope springs eternal, and so I kept thinking that this was something that I would get past, that I would get over. Uh, you know, as I've heard a lot of other folks say, I tried everything. I tried everything, to get better. Um, and yeah, nothing really worked. So at a certain point, um, I started having to think about accepting this condition on some level, which in the beginning was a lot like, chewing and swallowing glass. But eventually, I discovered a contemplative practice, which helped me a great deal. And actually, after my worst bout of ME/CFS, I went into the wilderness, as they say, and I couldn't work. I thought I was going to lose my home. And I just went to a state park near my home and essentially meditated for a whole summer. There was a tiny little stone chapel there, and I drug myself into the chapel one day, and I was so tired that I just lay down in the pews. But when I left, I felt a little bit better. And so I went back the next day. And I often had to lie down when I was there. But I went back and I went back and I went back. And I slowly but surely got to the point where I could do a real seated meditation. And I kind of did that all summer. And I felt so much better. And I felt better for months. And I had a really productive few months. And then as I got busier and busier and my practice fell off and the stress increased in my life, I just got sicker again.
Mm.
And from that point forward, I was just pretty sick until I finally, discovered this work and
Mhm.
started to get a sense of what was happening.
Oh, yeah. And all these years, what were the doctors saying to you? Because I'm guessing you went to the doctors and tried to get help, as most people do.
Yeah.
What stories were they telling you, or what was their reaction to your tests and you coming in?
Um, yeah, they were just telling me that nothing was wrong. I mean, I got a Hashimoto's diagnosis at one point, and so really went down that rabbit trail
Oh,
and tried
deep rabbit
everything I
hole.
could to heal Hashimoto's. Um, but a lot of people have Hashimoto's and aren't that sick. Um, yeah, so a lot of rabbit holes, but really they were telling me that nothing was wrong.
Yeah. So you're kind of left on your own
Yeah,
to try and solve this thing.
yeah,
I'm really interested about your meditation, that window of time when you were doing that all summer,
yeah,
because I remember there were actually windows of time during my recovery where I was really deep into meditation. And never in my life had I slowed down that much to, sit down and be quiet and listen to my own thoughts or quiet my own thoughts. So that's the first time I really had these experiences of meditation. And although I was feeling tons of symptoms and, my life it felt like it was in ruins, those were some actually very special times because I never meditated that deep. And it's almost like I got in touch with myself at a deeper level than ever connected with myself. So what was that like, meditating that summer and getting in tune with your own mind?
yeah. It was really profound for me in
Mhm.
ways that are hard to describe. So I think of my life very clearly as before I went into the wilderness and after. So I had never meditated a lot either and sort of stumbled into this contemplative practice. Um, and it was, yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I think that I had some bad habits, we'll say, before that summer. I had some really difficult relationships. I think that I was, had my own form of brokenness and was attracted to other people, who had that a kind of brokenness that resonated with mine. Um, and after that summer, I things changed so profoundly. It's hard to describe. I just wasn't attracted to those kinds of people anymore as friends, as partners. And that's just one example of many. I also had just a hugely creative spurt and was able to create and work in ways that I hadn't for a long time.
Mm,
So that was absolutely key for me and still is. Absolutely still is. And I think, if life were such that I could just have, um, meditated all the time, then I might have been fine. I might have, never relapsed. But actually, I think one needs both. You need both the tools and a deep understanding of what's happening in the nervous system and brain, and that still practice. The
Mhm.
combination of those two, I think, has gotten me to where I am today.
Absolutely. And I remember when I would crash really bad, I had many, many crashes. The only thing I could do was meditate because I couldn't move in bed. I couldn't even really think straight. So I had to dig deep
Mhm,
and find that quiet place inside.
mhm.
And without ever crashing or going through all this stuff, I never would have been forced to experience that.
Right.
So, we always talk about we see in these recovery videos, CFS was the worst thing that happened to people, but also the best thing because it forced them to unlock a different side of them that they didn't know existed. Like maybe the more patient, more calm, more stop and smell the roses part of them versus kind of rushing through life and just constantly trying to push push push.
Yes.
So it's a huge turning point in people's lives. I think every crash I had was a little bit of a turning point for me because I learned something about myself every crash, um, especially what I'm made of and how resilient I am.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
know
I mean, I have a program now called Still Wild, Contemplative Practice for Change-Making Women, which really, it encapsulates what you're saying. It's finding that balance, which I think I probably wouldn't have found had I not
Mhm.
been forced to.
Yeah.
I think activists and artists and probably, everybody um, falls into this trap on some level. We just push and push and feel like we're never doing enough. And so now that I'm feeling so much better, I do not want to fall into that trap again. And so this idea of, balancing both, the still contemplative side of life and the wild change making, living out loud side is really important to me. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm deeply committed to maintaining that balance at this point.
Oh yeah. So you're on this journey for many, many, many years and you're living like a half life. And what were some of the earlier things that helped you level up in recovery? So definitely the meditation, and what other, you know, what other things were big stepping stones for you, right before you found us? Because you found us only, we started working with us only a few months ago, but you were already cruising on your way to the finish line.
Yeah.
And this was like the last little step, but what helped you get to that point?
So I discovered the Curable app about 2 years ago, and that changed my life just because that introduced me into the world that you reside in.
Mhm.
And so for the first time, I understood what was happening. And I was able to mitigate that. So I discovered the work of, Dr. Sarno and started reading and watching videos. And I recovered such that I was able to join a bodybuilding program, which was
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
Um, but I was never able to do the whole program, right? So I kept wanting to be recovered, and I kept wanting to say that I was better, but and I was so much better, but I just couldn't get all the way there. So, I would do what I could during the week. I would work out as best I could, but always toward the end of the week, I was crashing. I never made it through the week. So I quit that program after about 9 months, which was tough because that I was in a program with a bunch of really wonderful women that felt like family. And I had a wonderful coach who was really sensitive to my needs and kind of let me go at my own pace when I needed to. But I said, look, I have to go figure this out. There are pieces of the puzzle that there are a few remaining. I have to go find them somewhere. So I left and I joined another program, which was good and helpful, but I still somehow wasn't getting the pieces that I needed. And I'm not sure why that is. And so around that time, I discovered your videos, which helped so profoundly, Miguel. Really, they were so concise and frankly actionable. And so I
Mhm.
started putting those to use, as soon as I could. And then finally joined the program. And by the time I joined your program, I felt like, I could see the finish line. I
Mhm.
just could not get there on my own. I just needed a little help. And so I joined. I listened to a lot of, the phone calls in the beginning. Those were really, really helpful. And then I had a couple of calls with my coach, and oh, she was wonderful. And she gave me some really specific tools, and that was it. Like I got it. I got it. It was exactly what I needed. Um, it was very specific. It was precise. And yeah, that was it. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm really glad it resonated with you and you found us in the first place and you were able to come to the calls. And it was Adrienne, right? Adrienne was the one who
Yes.
did your calls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause she would bring you up on calls on her internal meetings. She was like, yeah, Sarah is crushing it. Sarah Sharp, she is crushing it. I gave her a
Oh,
plan and she's following it to a T. She is killing it.
yeah.
She
I mean,
probably won't even be here for long. Yeah.
yeah, she just changed my life, honestly. I mean, she's a great coach, and her approach was really kind and understanding and very straightforward. And just like I kept saying, there are tools I need. I don't know what they are. And she just handed them to me. She just
Mhm.
handed them to me, and I was really ready to use them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so for people watching this, what are some examples of those tools? Like what was different that was introduced that you weren't doing before or
So
focusing on?
she gave me permission to do two things. She gave me permission to take naps, and she gave me permission to push through at a certain point. At a certain point, she said, Sarah, you're kind of at the point now where you're going to have to kind of walk through the fire. And I was like, oh, okay. Because I was still, I'd get to a certain point and I would pull back. I would hold
Mhm.
back. And I'll tell you how I put that into practice in a very tangible way. So I've never had headaches in my life. I mean, throughout this whole process, and even before, I just was never a person who suffered from headaches. And all of a sudden, a few months ago, I started getting ocular migraines, which then turned into actual migraines,
Mhm.
and they kind of got worse and worse. And this just started a few months ago. It's just like a weird thing. And I did not understand until I actually joined your program that there is a such thing as rotating symptoms, especially near the end.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess as I was getting better and better, my brain was like, oh, we better find something new to keep her safe. And so migraines was the thing it came up with, I suppose. And so one day, the week after I had talked to Adrienne, I was on my couch and it was time to work out, and I was getting a headache. I'd had a headache all day, kind of in the background, which was common at the time, and it started getting so bad that it started to scare me. I mean, really, really started to get painful. Which, yeah, it was kind of scary. And I said, nope, it is time to walk through the fire. And I went down and I worked out and I did a full workout, and I finished and my head didn't hurt. And honestly, I know this sounds ridiculous and I apologize. I have not had a headache since.
Mhm.
I mean, I think I just had to really decisively say no. That's not entirely true. There are a couple of times too that I can think of where I've just sort of started to get a hint of a headache, but I just kind of calm down and relax and rest for a minute and it goes away. But that was just a vitally important moment for me, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of those turning points in your recovery or those times where that could have been an instance where if you retreated at your level where you were more functional, if you had retreated from that, then your brain would have taken that as a sign as like, wow, these headaches work. So let's bring on more and more of them.
Right?
It
And I had been
threw a
retreating
curveball.
up to that point. I
Yeah.
definitely had. I would get to a point and retreat. And she also said, I don't pull back unless you are at a, high 7 or an 8. So that was really concrete for me because I'd been pulling back way before that.
Yeah.
Um, and the third big key in that phone call was that she gave me permission to take naps. I've been kind of scared of sleeping because I was so. I did a couple of months ago. I did a 5-day silent retreat, and I just kind of slept the whole time. And she said, that's really common at the end because your nervous system has calmed down. She said, I bet you're sleeping better in general. I was like, actually, I really am. Um, and she said, your nervous system can rest now, so let it. And so I did, and now I'm not napping.
Mhm.
anymore, which is not to say I won't. I'm sure there will be times when I need to, and that's fine. That's
Oh, yeah.
fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes that makes all the difference. There were such simple things, but to understand, like, why it's okay to push through in this instance or why it's okay to pull back in this
Yeah.
instance and nap. It's like knowing when to move forward, when to dial it back a little bit. It's like learning to use the throttle properly and not
Yes.
redline it, but also not completely stop the car. It's like, how do you
Right.
keep this momentum? And that's why it makes such a huge difference being able to interact with people who have been through this and
Oh,
know what they're doing
yeah.
and have an
It
answer
makes
for
it
anything.
makes all the difference in the world. I also think, in addition to those really important keys that she gave me, just connecting with a real person who had been through it and could kind of talk me through it and talk me through some fear. Um, yeah, it was really, really important.
Mhm. And how was it being in the community, like seeing other people and, you came in quite functional, but seeing other people on a similar journey, maybe a few steps behind you, but, you know, being really positive, putting in the work, coming to calls with wins,
Yeah.
everybody kind of moving in the same direction towards thriving health. What was that like?
It was great. It was great. And it seems like a really relaxed and frankly healthy community. I did another program and there was a lot of emphasis on what to say and what not to say. And it felt I was nervous much of the time, about the language that I used, and I didn't want to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. But I haven't experienced that here at all. There seems to be a really good balance of showing up in a really honest and authentic way. Everybody feels, free to do that. But at the same time, the emphasis is and has to be on wins and getting better. And yeah, so I think this program strikes a really good balance. And it's so supportive. You change your wins and everybody's really happy. And then you can support other people who have little wins and then big wins and everything in between.
Mhm. And the way I approach it and how I've tried to set everything up is, everybody I talk to with CFS or inside any of our communities, we try to talk to them just like they're normal people that
Mhm.
happen to be dealing with this hypersensitive nervous system issue, but it's not their identity. We don't talk to them as if they're sick people, because we know this is just a temporary period in their life. So
Mhm.
I think one of the things, as much as people want sympathy and empathy who deal with this, they also want to feel like a normal person, right? And not have people feel bad for them all the time. And they just want to fit in.
Yeah.
So when you get this community of people who understand, I think it makes such a huge difference, especially for a lot of people. This is their first time actually being around other people who can understand what they're going through.
Yeah.
It can be very isolating,
Yes.
very, very isolating.
Yeah.
So, that personalized plan that made a big difference in your rate of recovery, essentially. So, after you
Yeah, I
started
mean,
implementing those things.
without this program, Miguel, I think I could have stayed in that stuck place for years, honestly. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope not, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get there on my own.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we broke through that recovery ceiling. And sometimes that's all you need is just a little bit of tweaking. And
Yeah.
it's a couple small things that are holding people back in recovery. And then once you solve those small things, well, they seem small, but it's like the last little number in the combination lock
Yeah.
where you've done
Yep.
all the other combinations. It's just this last little thing and it goes click and then boom,
Yeah.
recovery starts soaring. So, what are some things you've been able to do recently that you haven't done in a long time? Or, what does life look like now?
Yeah. So I can do anything and everything. I mean, well, okay. Um, I still am really careful when it comes to cardio, I guess. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm working hard. I'm doing all the social stuff I want to do. I'm working out. I remember listening to a video, and forgive me, I don't remember the fellow's name, but he was a guy who was in your program and had recovered, and he was working out again. And I remember him saying, I'm doing everything but squats. And I remember thinking same, like there, at times when I've been feeling better, I did everything, but I never did squats because I was so They really got me, and it just was not worth the price. I can do squats all day long now. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, what does a workout look like for you? Or, what does a tough workout look like for Sarah?
I mean, I think it's pretty tough. It's a fairly traditional bodybuilding workout. So, I have, but Adrian suggested that I do 3 days a week. So I'm doing 3 days a week religiously still. And so I have, a lower body day and 2 upper body days. And I'm, I don't know, 3 sets of 8. And I'm really, really pushing hard now. I'm not afraid of pushing to as hard as I can go.
That's awesome. You're breaking a sweat in the gym and everything?
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I mean, I go to failure. I
That's
would
great.
never have done that before. I mean, I always, held back just a little bit. I don't
Mhm.
have to hold back anymore.
Oh, yeah. And any fear around, having those workouts when you're doing upper body day, back day, all that stuff, or you're just in there, endorphins are pumping?
Yeah. No fear. No
That's
fear.
great.
Post Adrian call. I mean,
Yeah,
this is new. But no fear.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's how you know you've really, really reached a new level in recovery, and you're pretty much past all of this, because the way I saw it was when I started working out, I had some APs, when I first started, but once I was able to do full on workouts and push myself to failure, like do push-ups until I couldn't do a single push-up more, or, I do drop sets and my arms feel like they're going to fall off,
Mhm.
or I'm drenched in sweat and my heart's pounding, but then I'm sitting in my car after and my heart rate's already down, relaxed. I'm like, wow, okay. No symptoms. Like
Yeah.
I'm definitely I'm definitely anti-fragile at this point. And
Right.
also I knew that if I did get a flare up, I knew exactly what to do.
Right.
And
Right.
that is where a lot of that recovery momentum comes from. It's just
Yes.
knowing that if something were to happen, you know exactly what to do. So
Right.
you're never left there feeling like, you're left for dead, or you
Yeah.
just have to hold on for dear life for the next 4 days, because you know
Right.
exactly what to do.
Right.
And
Right.
it's a huge difference.
Yep.
Huge, huge difference.
Yep.
So what else is new? I mean, any exciting things coming up this year? Any bucket list things you have?
Well, I'm working again, which, I've got a project. So I teach meditation now, which is really important to me. I have, yeah, an artistic project that I'm working on. So I'm writing a lot. I'm making videos, I'm posting. I just feel like I have my life back, and not just part of it, like all of it. My kids I have one in London and one in DC, and I'm not afraid of travel at all anymore. So I will see both of them this year, I hope. I mean, I know I'll get to DC, and my daughter is coming home twice, but I want to go to London now too.
Mhm.
And before I would have gone, but it would have been hard, and I would have paid for it.
Yeah, yeah,
And now I don't have to worry about that.
yeah. And I always like to ask people this, reflecting on your journey, because it's been quite the journey, right? 15 years is a long time dealing with these symptoms and, you know, having your health up in the air for a lot of those years. What are some mistakes you made? Well, maybe the top one or two mistakes you made over the years that probably hampered you the most in recovery, just so people watching this can know what to avoid.
Yeah. So I think back to a time when I had frozen shoulder. I had shoulder impingement syndrome. And so I could literally only raise my shoulder to there. And I went to physical therapy, and I went to the doctor, and I did exercises, and nothing seemed to, it helped a little, but it didn't help a lot. And I went to see a massage therapist who said, and I'll never forget her words. She said, "Yeah, we tend to baby a boo boo." And she just started, manipulating my arm and moving it all over the place. And she said, I don't, we're not going to do anything that's going to be painful, but we're going to, we want to move your arm in ways that might be uncomfortable. And so I think the biggest mistake I made in all those years that I was sick was just babying the boo boo. It was just all about protecting myself. And on a tired day, or if I started to crash, then it was just go to bed. go to bed, um, take care of yourself, don't move, shut out the world. And I think in retrospect, that just made things worse because there was so much fear around it and this idea that I just had to shut down and couldn't do anything or go anywhere or see anybody.
Mm,
And so when I finally was able to start, pushing through that a little bit, and in the beginning, I made some mistakes and pushed too hard and crashed, but yeah, not being so overprotective,
mm, yeah.
scared.
Overprotective, hyper vigilant, just,
Yeah.
seeing yourself as so, so, so fragile,
Yeah.
even though we may feel like that physically, um, you know, that perception of ourselves and being on edge like that all the time, it's only gonna add to how sensitive we are.
Mhm.
So, the hypervigilance is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Um, and what else? What's another thing that you feel like if you didn't do that, recovery would have went by a lot smoother or faster?
I wonder sometimes. So in the beginning, before I really understood what was happening, I hid. I spent a lot of time hiding. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't expect anyone else to. And I can remember, for part of this time, my kids are grown now, but my son still lived at home at a time when I was really pretty sick, and I would be lying in bed until he got home, and then he would get home, and I would jump out of bed and try to act like everything was fine because I didn't want him to worry.
Mm,
Um, and that just takes a lot of energy, hiding and dealing with all of that guilt and shame. And so I think, if I had to do it all over again, I would really try to have some of those hard conversations and not hide in the shadows and try to keep my fatigue a secret.
mhm.
Um, I would have been a better advocate for myself.
Yeah. It's hard to keep it all in for sure.
Hmm.
And, I had a few friends I could open up to about this, even though I could tell they couldn't really understand, didn't even make sense. It didn't even make sense to me.
Right.
I didn't even know how to explain it, but it made a huge difference being able to open up to certain people
Mhm.
and just getting it off my chest really versus keeping it all inside. Because it eats away at you when you can't share these things. So those are some of the things that slow down recovery. What are some things that really sped up recovery? Like what do you think were the biggest game changers for you?
So I had to change the background music in my life, which meant that I I listened to your videos a lot. Like I just had them playing, even if I was doing other things. So I just sort of had to have, yeah, I just kind of a steady diet of hope and science and deep understanding about what was happening. That really helped me from, spiraling sort of back into that place of helplessness or discouragement.
Mhm.
So that helped more than I can say.
Changing the background music. I like that.
Hmm.
It's so true because that is kind of programming your subconscious as well,
Yeah.
right? Because when we're not listening to things, or let's say there's two options, it's like, let me just sit with my own mind all day. But the mind can be on a very dark path for some people
Mhm.
because all they've read online is, you can't recover, you can't get better, 5% recovery rate, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's the tune that's playing in your head, right? And when we're in an anxious state or when we're in survival mode, a lot of these thoughts and self-talk, it can be coming from a place of hypervigilance and anticipation and worst case scenario versus having YouTube videos in your ear talking about solutions and something that's
Right.
solution focused.
Yeah.
It starts to reprogram your brain. And like you said, that background music, it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. It really does. And I think too, kind of on the same hand, I understanding that what was happening had more to do with my brain than my mind in some ways. I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of a nuanced conversation, but I think that as long as you have this idea that it's all in your mind, then there's a lot of guilt and shame that comes with that. And really understanding the science and how powerful your brain is and how much your brain really just wants to protect you, making that shift, then erases all the guilt and shame.
Mhm.
And so that was really important to me too.
Yeah. For me, that was one of the turning points as well, because I thought it was all in my mind. Because I guess one could argue it is in your mind, but your mind is comes from your brain. Your thoughts come from your brain processes. And there definitely is some wiring issues up there when people are dealing with this, or not issues, like just imbalances,
Yeah.
really. The circuitry, it's imbalanced. It's kind of like a computer. The software is just glitching out,
Mhm.
right? And there's something in there that needs to be fixed. So I tell people it is a very physical thing that's happening, but on a very micro scale.
Mhm.
Your muscles aren't melting, your lungs aren't shutting down,
Right.
your
Your
heart,
heart is fine.
yeah, your
Mhm.
heart is not malfunctioning.
Mhm.
It's just the signaling that's being sent to all these different places.
Right.
That's what's actually having issues.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I had, my brain found all kinds of creative ways of shutting me down. For many of those years, I had really intense tailbone pain. So sitting for any length of time was torturous. And I just learned to live with that. I had a really bad tennis elbow. I had sort of trigger finger. I had a lot of neck pain. All that's just gone. It's just gone.
that's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I haven't had symptoms for years and years. I mean, I'll get a headache once in a blue moon if I'm working a lot, but it's extremely rare. I have to push myself really hard to even get a twinge of a symptom, So now I'm sleeping great, have thriving energy, I'd say, and I'm anti-fragile. I feel like my quality of life is way better than it was than before I got sick. So I've said this in a few other videos, but it's almost like I lived 3 lives up to this point.
Yeah.
There was prior to getting sick, I was the old Miguel version 1.0.
Mm.
Then there was the time when I was sick, and that in itself felt like a whole lifetime. And then there was after, recovering, or
Yeah.
after I knew how to get out of this and I just changed my identity. I was no longer a sick person, because
Right.
actually, when I was in a wheelchair in the hospital and I knew the science now and my doctor taught me this, to me mentally, I felt like I had recovered. And
Mhm.
it was going to take time for my body to catch up. So from that moment on, that was the beginning of 2.0 version of Miguel.
Yeah.
And 2.0 is so much better than 1.0.
Yeah, I get that. Also, I have always wanted to ask you, how did you luck out and get this doctor? I mean,
Yeah, I think about it all the time. I think a part of it was, it definitely was luck. But then also to get to that lucky place, I had to go through like 40 different doctors over many years,
okay.
many hospital visits. And man, there were so many other things I tried that didn't work. So many IV treatments. I did over 100 IV treatments,
Ugh.
100 IV treatments where I sat there, they poked me in the arm. And a lot of those visits, I was wheelchaired in because I was so debilitated. And at 19, 20 years old, I'm being wheelchaired in when I used to be an athlete. So there were definitely a lot of fires I had to go through. That's why I tell people, you don't know when you're 3 feet from gold. Maybe striking gold is finding this channel,
Mhm.
or finding a recovery story that resonates with you, or putting into practice something you learned online and then actually seeing results and then sparking hope. You don't know when that time is going to come. So for me, I found him at my worst place. I mean, I was bedridden for about 8 months, like bad, like spoon fed, couldn't shower,
Mm.
um, couldn't go to the washroom on my own, and 2 months in the hospital for those last 8 months. ICU, they're detoxing me, they're pumping me full of medications, and I thought my life was over. Like, I didn't see how I was gonna make it to the next day, and to be frank, there were times when I was like, "Why did I even wake up today?" It was really dark. So, right when I thought things couldn't get worse during my recovery, they got worse, and then they got worse, and they got worse, and about 20 more rounds of that, you find a new Mariana's Trench, a new low, and then a new low, and then eventually, at probably my lowest point, no, not probably, definitely my lowest point, where all hope is lost. It's kinda like in those movies where the superhero, his back's against the wall and he's supposed to die in that moment. He's supposed to die. Like, The odds are against him. He shouldn't win this battle. Next thing you know, something comes out of nowhere and something shifts. And that's like what it was for my doctor to find me.
Mhm.
And I mean, the first sentence he said to me, or I think it was the second sentence, that's when I knew I was going to be okay. Because he just looked at me, smiled, completely calm. He didn't look confused at all, like all the other doctors looked at me. And he just said, I know exactly what's going on here. You're going to be good in no time. We're going to fix you up. And you're going to be walking outside in the real world in just a few months. You'll have your life back. And he said it with so much calmness and confidence that I couldn't even question it. And it was the first time I could actually lean on someone for, support. And someone had belief in me and knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
So
that's the beauty of that personal connection. I think there is a lot of power in that personal exchange, which is why, yeah, I appreciated those calls so much, and people were able to ask your coaches questions in real time and get real answers. And that's just invaluable. But yeah,
mhm,
I think you really lucked out, because I just think there are not a lot of doctors who frankly understand
mhm,
this,
yeah.
the MECFS. And
There's
yeah,
not. There's not. And that's why I push so hard on YouTube, and I'm recording hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos. I try to put out free content as much as possible on every single platform. I tell my team, hey, we need to post more, post 4 times a day, post 6 times a day. Cause, I think in the online world, you see all these numbers and followers and subscribers. I remember when I was getting 10 views on the YouTube videos. But to me, those are like 10 people in bed because I was that person before. So to me, I know every single number counts. And, I just tell my team, like, let's crank out more content. What more can we do? What more podcasts can we go on? Because, clearly this stuff is helping people. And it would be wrong for me to hold this information. Basically, I won the lottery by meeting my doctor. And I got to tell the world about this.
yeah,
The world needs to know this stuff.
yeah.
So
And you're doing a really good job of it. All of you are. You are shedding light in dark corners.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's funny, Miguel. Before I made a big turning point, I went to DC and met my two kids on vacation. And this is still when I was, living a half life. And so I had, for the first time in my life, just a few weeks before, posted a letter on Facebook about my condition. And I felt able to do that because at this point it was post COVID and people were suffering from long COVID. And, as best we understand, MECFS is kind of a cousin of COVID,
Mhm,
behave in the same way. Um, and so I felt like people might understand for the first time. And so I went on vacation, and my kids kind of understood what I had been dealing with in a way that they hadn't before. And they were so lovely. They rented scooters for all of us, so I didn't have to walk all over DC. But they were so concerned, and it frankly took a lot of their energy to figure out, how to mitigate that experience for me. And I could see their worry. And I came home from that vacation just with a fire in the belly, because I did not want my kids to worry. And I told my husband, this is strange in retrospect, but I told my husband I was going to build a healing cave in my study, and I was not going to come out until I had answers. I mean, I was just, after 15 years, I was just fed up. And so I literally went in and I put paper all over the windows. It was pretty paper, but I covered the room. And the deal was I could go in and meditate and nap, and I wasn't going to come out until I had an answer. And do you know that that's where I discovered the Curable app? It was during that week. So, stranger things have happened, but I got really bullheaded about recovery at some point.
wow,
Um,
wow.
yeah.
It's crazy, each one of our stories, there's so many people who recover from this and have their own journeys and stories, but when I was in the thick of it, in order to deal with everything that was going on, I had to pretend like I was in a movie, like my life was a story. And this was the part of the movie that was difficult and hard. And this is like the rising action and the rising conflict. Because I loved storytelling growing up, and movies and music and all of that stuff. So I looked at everything I was going through as an epic story, like I was Rocky or something. And this was like the big challenge, right?
That's
But
great.
the only thing is this movie lasted many, many years. And I almost had music playing in the background of like, what this is the turning point in my recovery, or this is where things go to the next level. But each one of us, you could make a movie about our journeys, all the ups and downs, all the realizations, all like the aha moments, all the times where you thought it was an aha moment and then you slid backwards. Like it's just such a roller coaster. But you know what? Looking back, I think that's what makes life interesting. So would I trade all of those years of ups and downs and crashes to live just a regular normal life where I didn't really remember all those years? Probably not, because at the end of the day, at least I have stories to tell, and I was forced to level up my character in life. You just get more tools every time you go into the fire and go through difficult things and challenges. It forces you to level up some aspect of yourself, because leveling up is the only way to get out of this. It's the
That's right.
only way.
That's right. Yeah. And bonus, I think after an experience like this, one has so much more compassion for anyone who's suffering in any way,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Yeah.
think is, yeah,
Oh yeah. And
also a lovely byproduct.
yeah, and I feel like I could, like if someone's having a rough day or they're going through rough times, I feel like I could almost sense it now. Not that I'm an extreme empath, but I could see when someone's going through difficult things. They're more quiet, they're more reserved. Like if I'm in a friend group and one person isn't saying much, or they're more reserved, I'm like, that used to be me. There's something going on. So I can absolutely resonate with it, because I've been there before. Whereas
Yeah.
before my mindset was just like, just toughen up, just keep on living. Like, what's the problem? Why are you
Right.
being so negative?
Yeah.
until that person became me, and I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's why.
No, it's actually not that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that simple. It's not as
Mhm.
simple as snapping your fingers and you think better and boom, all your problems go away.
Right.
It's a challenge. So, this has been a really great chat. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people listening to this right now who are struggling, who are maybe in your shoes where you were, several years ago, and they're
Mhm.
looking for hope online? They're seeing this and they're like, wow, how did Sarah do it? She's crushing it. Any
Mhm.
words of encouragement you want to share with them?
Um, I think I just bring a message of hope. Like you will get there. I promise you will get there. And if you have discovered, Miguel and these videos, you'll probably get there faster than you think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Never, ever give up.
Yeah. That's
Never
right.
give up.
Never give up. Help is available. Reach out. Someone is there to take your hand now.
Absolutely. Awesome, Sarah. Well, really appreciate having you on and sharing your story. And it's been an epic ride for you up to this point. But what's even more exciting is this next chapter of life
Yeah.
that you're heading into, the
Yeah.
anti-fragile 2.0 version of Sarah. And
That's right.
there's so much more life to live. And, with everything you've been through in the last 15 years, now you have this new sense of gratitude for the simplest of things, because
That's
either
right.
these are things you prayed and
That's
wished for
yeah.
so long.
Yeah, it's true. And thank you so much, Miguel. Your work is really changing lives in ways that are hard to describe. We
Yeah.
are so full of gratitude. It's
Thank
really
you.
important.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And the most fulfilling thing for me is, talking to people like you and hearing your story and seeing how you've transformed your life for the better and gone from surviving to thriving. The whole reason I started this was because I went through that experience, and I wanted to share that with people,
Yeah,
and help them go through that same transformation. So it's awesome to see you moving into this next chapter of life. So for everybody watching this right now, take this as a message of hope and inspiration and undeniable proof that no matter how long you've had this, no matter how severe you were, as long as you had your tests and scans ruled out and you're not dealing with other health issues, you can absolutely get your life back from CFS. Regardless of what people say online, despite what they say the recovery rates are. We have a very high recovery rate with people who consume this kind of content. So surround yourself with positive things, surround yourself with hope and content like this. And Sara is just one example of so many people getting their lives back. And we're not aliens, we're humans just like you. So if I can do it, if people like Sara can do it, there's people around the world who can do it, then you can absolutely get your life back too. And if you wanted some extra help, we're here to help you. You can always apply for one of our programs and see which one is the best fit for you. The link is going to be down in the description. But always remember that you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living life with thriving health. So we will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much, Sara.
Thank you.